Well, let's do the intros, everybody. Tell us about you, what your role is with regard to MSSP, if you have one or have had one, and how you got involved in that space.
So I'm Evgeniy. I've been in cyber for quite a long time. My current role is Chief Strategy Officer for a company called Discern Security. Having said this, I spent almost 17 years working for a company called Auguria Group, now called Sideris. It is one of the earliest MSSPs that became global. I started there as a firewall engineer and kind of move up, doing variety of different things, all the way to running VP of architecture and design.
How about
Awesome.
you, Jessvin?
I'm Jessvin Thomas. I wouldn't be surprised if we've run into each other before because I remember doing some work with Hirschvik Group. So I've been in MSSP and cybersecurity for 20 something years. A friend of mine told me that every time I left an MSSP and then I ended up going back to another one, he said I swam back to Alcatraz. So it's definitely one of those things where you either love it or you hate it. And but I've really come to enjoy security operations and everything that means. And currently, I'm CEO of a company called Auguria. We are about AI native capability to help you improve your SIM and get better detection and efficacy out of it.
I'm Sandhya Pallana. I have many years in security, in fact, 20, and I've specifically worked in the MSSP space for quite some time, helped an organization build to where they are today. I will leave some of the names behind, but I also worked for Splunk and some other organizations for those years, preceding that time. I also work with teams and sales teams specifically to boost effectiveness and business development. Aside from that, do yoga and wellness as a business. But primarily in the tech space, I'm coaching and doing business development for organizations and building their technical expertise and looking towards peak performance of their business development team.
So thank you so much for joining us today. The genesis of this was me trying to get out of SOC consulting. For a long time, I've gotten called into MSSPs, usually initially to look at the tech stack and ask, how do we reduce false positives and how do we increase efficacy and MTTR, MTTD? And then I get in front of the customer and the team and I ask, well, do you make money? And typically the person who I'm in front of is like, well, what do you mean? I thought we were going to look at the tech. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you don't make money. And what I found over and over and over again is that there are people who make their way through the ranks and they come through security and they come through tech and then they get a P&L. This happened to me, right? And they don't know what the numbers are. They don't understand they might know what P&L means, but I found myself explaining what COGS and what SG&A is and what long-term customer value is and all that stuff. And so I realized that there was a gap in the MSSP world that is not present in the MSP world. MSP people understand this. MSSP people tend not to below a certain level. And in fact, even a lot of people who are at the highest levels are aware of the numbers, but are afraid to take the steps necessary to become more profitable. And you've all run into people from that world and that position and tried to help them build business cases and create greater profitability in the companies. So the first question I want to ask is, what's the most surprising thing that you've learned about MSSP profitability or lack of profitability over the years? And go ahead and jump in, anybody you would like to.
I think people really underestimate the human aspect of it, the need for tooling as well as skill set. So the training and the efficiency with the tooling and managing not just the skill set, but also the burnout and really getting a better understanding of what makes your employees happy to make them most effective. So I think the human aspect is often overlooked, and I see that more times than not where MSSPs are losing staff based on just poor performance.
That my kind of view on the part discussed. I think people is definitely very important, and if we talk about profitability or lack of the profitability, is MSSPs in many cases don't know how to actually license and charge customers to become profitable. This is probably one of the biggest challenges I saw across many MSSPs, because when I graduated from my MSSP Auguria group, I went and consulted to other MSSPs as well. And they don't understand the part that when the vendor need to charge them, They need to charge for the services, and there's how many FTEs back to people will need it to do something. So understanding and creating a framework how to actually create a cost will be profitable is very, very hard. And how you're going to scale back to people, these people that will do the job. So this is one of the biggest, I guess, surprises or something I learned along the time, that people lose money because of this. Second part, this is the good part, I guess. The ones that make money, the ones that are profitable, they know how to balance between technology and automation and still keep the human part in the loop. What I mean, the human part in the loop, like none of us wants to call technical support for your phone when you're angry and talk to a robot. Guess what? When the customer calls, they want to talk to you. They want to talk to a human being that in many cases will understand the part that the customer need to be that angry and they want to express their opinion, and then you're going to help them. And this is human part. If it's a customer success person or the salesperson, the technical person, it's a balance between this.
I think I've seen like a kind of a similar trend in the human aspect. I think that's the biggest area that's the surprise. And I think if the surprise is really like it's a step function, it's not linear. So when you have technology, it tends to be linear for most of the cases. You get more data, you might hit a wall or something, but the CFO can model that. I got more data, it cost me more, price more, right? But with human beings, like they're very elastic. And so, especially when you're starting out small, you start out small and there's sort of, you don't realize it, one guy doing three guys' jobs. And it's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's working fine. And then one day it's not. The person's burned out, that person leaves, whatever. And you realize you're actually behind on three jobs, like not just one. Whereas like, if it was a server, if it was something, you kind of have a better sense of that. And I think what ends up happening as well is like, you almost have two different styles of leadership that starts MSSPs. You have a very technical side, which thinks about scale early, and they're scaling things, they're figuring things out properly. The problem with them is they don't usually get off the ground. They don't get very far because they're thinking about scale way before they have scale. And so they can't sell enough for, whatever. So you just don't hear about it a lot. What you hear more often is the other type that gets off the ground, but then has a hard time sustaining it because they're taking like a professional services approach. Yeah. And like one guy's on 5 different jobs. It's great. You're making money. You're sorting things out. You're kind of tooth and nail getting everything to work and everything's going great until suddenly it's not. And so that to me it's been surprised of seeing like the two different approaches people have taken. One approach, the scale approach, sustains better, hard to get off the ground when it's usually buffed by technology and people thinking about it that way. And the other approach is like, okay, let's just make this work with people. And it's like the road runner that's like run off the cliff. You don't realize the moment your foot gets off the cliff, you only moments when you're like, 10 feet forward and it's too late to go back. And then unwinding is way more expensive than it is to fix at the time. So that's what that's kind of the thing I've seen, but it's that human elasticity that makes it possible to run off the cliff longer than you think you should be able to.
I think that's a great point, Jessvin. That's exactly what I think is a major concern, where organizations are not trying to create a niche for themselves. MSSPs are trying to cover, say, too many tools, and because they happen to have, an FTE that's particularly great at one thing or another, versus really training and making their teams fully understand certain tools and not all the tools, so that way they can better sustain their model. Not looking for the unicorn that can take, 5 hats, and 5 roles, but building the unicorn where each of your employees have a similar skill base.
Is that a phenomenon of the growth of bootstrapped MSPs entering MSSP? And this is something that I think we'll get to in another episode, if not this one. When you start with whatever you've got, and typically you're successful because of 1 or 2 star employees. Usually there's a lot of principal-led delivery and principal-led selling, and you start to imagine scaling, but you have customers that are dependent on white glove services. We hear this all the time. Like, we deliver white glove service, and that's how you start. But when you try and attach scaling to a heavily customized service, you wind up with a mismatch in terms of expectations about the service versus the reality. Different if you're taking on capital. Like if you go out and get VC, and this is something that like you don't often get to see, that sort of pivot point. But there are a lot of companies that sort of fall into the cliff because they don't get the capital or they don't achieve profitability because of, and the answer to the completion of that statement is what I want to explore. But let's move on to another question. The paradox in all of this, which is I think the topic or the title of this one, the profitability paradox. Stagger, depending on who you talk to, who you're listening to, is somewhere between 13 and 16% in MSSPs. Could be wrong, right? But that's roughly what it is. There's also a lot of consolidation. Everybody knows how bad the problems of cybersecurity are getting. Everybody knows that it's difficult to find good talent. Plenty of talent around. There are plenty of people around, not a lot of talent. And at the same time, we see plenty of MSSPs that are discounting themselves into bankruptcy or worse yet, a kind of zombie state. So how is it that we have kind of a failure of the supply and demand curve, right? We should see higher prices, we should see more profit, and yet we're not. What's going on?
People onboard new customers, and the customers are happy until they not happy and they're not renewing. So they're trying, I don't remember the picture from, but it was a picture of a half horse drinking water all the time, and the water comes out. I don't remember exactly from where it came, but it's not for a long time. And there's so many professionals on the market that help MSSPs and MSPs getting new sales. And I spoke with some of them and I asked a simple question. Do you just help them to get new customers or you help them to retain? I'm like, no, this is not a problem. This is their problem. And I think this is one of the problems, people focusing on bringing new customers, but then the customer is not happy for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to go to this technicality right now, and they leave. So you are slowly dying.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, that's actually a hard question from my perspective, at least. I don't know. I definitely agree with you. Like churn is a problem. And it's another one of those examples where I just go like, everything's fine until it's not. Like suddenly it just happens. Especially, when you're modeling out your business and you're modeling out a business that, let's say you assume it's growing at 10 to 13%, 15%. Like the beauty of ARR, it's almost like buying stock on margin. It's really great until it's not. And so you've structured into all of your costs, like fixed, like you're just assuming, okay, all this money will carry forward and then I'm going to add this more money, and the other problem with, I think, MSSP versus, let's say, professional services is that the investment is all up front, so that's where to me, like with the onboarding thing, it's like the costs are all up front. And the long tail, the LTV is really where the value is. Whereas, let's say you're doing professional services and you lose a customer, you've calculated the margin on like an hour by hour basis. If you had a customer for just a month, you'd probably be upside down. Like you can't sustain a monthly customer. If you had professional services, you charge them whatever you charge them, $200 an hour. You're paying $100. You're profitable on day one, and it's so much easier to manage. And so when things unwind, they unwind in a very complex way. I think the other thing is there's more and more, the barrier to entry has gotten lower, which means there's more and more people saying the same thing. It is honestly commoditizing in a lot of areas. And so, yes, it's growing 13%, but the rate, or whatever number it is, but the rate of change is like higher than that, So you're running around like, and those are all like drag costs. They're all like, whether it's switching from one customer to another, trying to save a customer, trying to do this, trying to keep up with a new technology, add another rule. And it's actually a very complex business to model, I think. And when you get it wrong, it's like margin, it multiplies. It's not additive. It's like exponential almost. Like one little change over here causes so many other things. And then you're just trying to keep up and keep up and keep up. And at least that's my feeling. I don't have like a discrete answer to it, but I kind of know exactly what you mean because I've seen it from the PE side. Where the PE side on paper, this looks beautiful. You've got a business growing at a generally good CAGR. You've got ARR. You've got a must demand. It's hard for somebody else to do something else. Like there's all these positive things, and all you got to do is build some 24/7 SOC and keep going, right? But it's not software. Like it really isn't software. And so I think we look at the business as if it's software that should attain margins of software, like, let's call it managed software. So like 60, 70% margin. And really it's just not exactly that. It's a lot harder to structure correctly, I think. That's at least I haven't figured out the answer yet. Let's put it that way. But those are my speculations.
Yeah, it seems to me there's a series of misunderstandings over what kind of business one's in. So managed services or ops is not like projects and not like software. And yet they interact. Like there's usually some kind of professional services activity or project-based activity at the onboarding phase. And we all, most of us, all of us who've done MSS know that the success or failure of an account usually starts with onboarding. You get onboarding right, you're probably okay.
Peter,
if
if
you
I
priced
may,
it right.
not just during the
Yeah.
onboarding, because after the onboarding, after some time, you need to upgrade to the new version of the same, depending on the same. Okay, maybe it's a cloud, you don't need to. A new version of EDR, firewalls, if you do device management. So even with the cloud model that the management is supposed to upgrade itself, in some cases, you do need to have upgrades on the customer side. So it's moving in and out of the managed services back to professional services, depend what need to be done.
There's a lot of focus on customer acquisition in most organizations and not as much focus on customer retention when they know they need the retention for the ARR. And yet they're not creating, a client-based organization where you are trying to act as a consultant for that organization, at least quarterly, and checking in on other projects and what else is happening and what your work with them is potentially affecting the larger organization, and creating more than one relationship on the tech side with your customer as well, because you lose somebody and you don't get the full picture if you're just looking and having conversations with one representative from your customer. So it's the 360 view, and the retention focus is often just not there because everyone's often really focusing on customer acquisition.
To add something small here, I think we all agree with 80-20 rule. Nobody removed the 80-20 rule. And in most cases, the 20% of the customers bring you the 80% of the revenue. So towards what you guys think, if one customer that maybe it's a 5% of the entire revenue, okay, suddenly decide to leave and you have 2-3 months before you know about that, then like, oops, you have 5 people maybe working on this customer or 10 people working on these customers. What do you do with these people? How do you pay them? It's like a snowball effect if you lose one big customer.
Well, at the same time, you have the 20% of customers that are usually paying you the least money who are making 80% of the trouble, right? One of the first pieces of advice I usually give, which is usually met with a little bit of, well, raise your prices 30%. Well, what if I do that? Then 30% of my customers will quit. I'm like, yes, they will. I mean, you don't have to fire them, do you? And so I think that to some degree, it's a matter of courage and faith in the business.
You make a great point. So if you focus your staff on just one large customer, I think you're setting yourself up to fail. Absolutely. You definitely need to keep adding to the funnel and looking at your business model and making sure that there's more flexibility in each organization and each member of your staff that can address more than one of your customers.
So maybe Moby Dick was about a bad idea. You don't want that whale. Whale hunting is dangerous, especially if you catch it. Let's move to another question. When we look at good MSSPs, bad MSSPs, what do the good ones have in common? What do the bad ones have in
Long list.
Yeah. Well, one question is good for who, right? So like that's a big thing, is like the customer loves it, it's great technically, or it's profitable. And I'm not saying those things are mutually exclusive, but I think like it's hard to measure what good even is.
My thesis is that MSSPs that are highly profitable are better able to serve their customers, their employees, their owners, their investors, maybe even the public if they're involved. And so, I mean, the answer to my question that I would respond with is they're making healthy margins consistently, and they have long-term customer value and all that good stuff. But what's behind that? How are they able to do that?
Well, I think it's a clear value proposition, fully understanding their value and being able to communicate it well to their customers. I think they need to be able to be scalable so they can scale with their organizations as well. It's the talent and the retention so that you are bringing people up from a tech 1 to a tech 3 where you're not, you're trying to look at churn with your employees. Customer trust is huge. And then finding a niche, I think, is really important. Compliance, perhaps your HIPAA or PCI or SOC 2, GDPR, those things start to matter when you're really speaking your value towards something very specific that you can do that others can't do as well. And, that would help be your, differentiation.
I want to add to the niche part. I think important part is define your North Star as an MSSP. There's many MSSPs that like, we are global or we do everything. And there's other MSSPs that really know what they're doing. And they can say no to customers because they're saying, okay, we're not the best. We're not doing application security managed services. Okay, we're not doing XYZ. This is what we do. We do this the best, and we know what we're doing. And they may create technical partnership with other people that actually can do and refer to others. But I see it's clearly the bigger the companies that try to say we're doing the IAM managed services. We know what we're doing. And in reality, they hire somebody third party to trying to do this for them. So they become very wide and not very deep in some cases. And at the same time, I see quite a good MSSPs that are local. And they say, we are local to this region. We cannot do global. But local companies, local enterprises like what they do because they understand they have somebody local, they can actually drive to them as well when needed. So this is part I see on a success on what people do because they understand what they're doing and what they're not doing.
Fully agree with that.
I would agree with that too. I think some of the reason why you get into those situations is growth. So I think this, like, margin's one thing, but I think growth is hard because going back to the scaling thing and the fact that the capital is all up front, like growth, like I could imagine if all I had to do was manage 10 customers and I was profitable on that 10 customers, I'd probably be perfectly fine. I could protect them better than just doing the one customer. I have enough scale. If I was a single customer, it's hard to hire the right number of people. But if I have 10 customers, I have enough scale that if I lose a person or not, I can afford it. Like I'm constantly tweaking and updating and things like that. But obviously every business wants to grow. And as you're growing, is that growth sustainable? Not just in dollars, but like Evgeniy said before, it was like there's maintenance. Like every one of those customers have to be maintained. Every one of those customers have to have things that are updated. Every time there's got to be people to add alerts. And then growth leads to trying to do a lot more things that you might not be fully ready for, whether that is a new platform that you need to support, a new set of alerts, a different, like IAM or something. And I still think it's a very good idea to add other SKUs, but I think the hardest thing is balancing growth. And then if you're not profitable or if you're VC backed or something like that, then really you got to drive growth. But that to me has been the most challenging thing, is like trying to get a lot of growth, not letting the bottom fall out, like getting a point to just, man, I bet you if every MSSP out there would probably say, if I just had 1 year, we're just sort of stayed the same and we were fine. We could pay everybody, but we just did this one thing and got really good at this one for 1 year. Next year, like, we'll be fine. And that's like impossible. But I feel like that's the hard thing. And then that leads you to all the scope creep and all the other things you're trying to do to, to grow the business.
So scope creep, you just mentioned about maintenance. There's devil in the details in the agreements. So for example, updates versus upgrades, like firewall management. I saw so many mistakes people doing, like, yeah, we just want these customers. We don't care to have 50 firewalls. We do everything for them. And it's like, no, please define between minor version and major version, because the moment they need to upgrade, you're going to start losing money because they tell you, but you told us we're going to upgrade everyone. So back to maintenance, back to nuances. What did you agree with the customers? Because you ready to do everything for customer acquisition without understanding how it's going to impacting you when maintenance will come.
There's many organizations that will give you a general answer to what their environment looks like and what you should be monitoring, when in fact it needs to be very specific and they need to be held accountable when it's not, and better understand what it is for the entire environment, because you can't protect them if you don't fully understand what's there. I've seen so many scope of work go back and forth where often the numbers were slightly off and some of the details were off, and audits are really an important aspect of that.
But I'm outsourcing because I have no idea what I'm doing, so I want you to deal with it as a customer.
Well, depending on the side of the organization, sorry, go ahead.
No, Pete, you're probably about to say the same thing. Like, I really do think that is one of the core trickiest things, especially in security. Because the thing with security is like, it's hard to define what good is. what is the scope? The scope is really, I never get hacked. That's the scope. Yeah, here's my stuff. I never get hacked, right? And that's different than like, even if you're doing network operations where you're like, all right, the network is running. People can connect. Okay, now the network's not running. Okay, I got it. Like, I know what that is. I know how to measure it, and I think that's exact. And you're usually operating in an environment where the person doesn't know all the answers to those questions, which is why they're handing it to you. And you do want to get every exact answer you can, but that's almost, to your point, Evgeniy, by definition, impossible. Like nobody knows themselves, even if they tried to figure it out, right? B, like the team you're talking to may not know it all either. And C, it'd be unprofitable to find every piece of information. So it's like, but it is this is the hard part in my mind. It's like finding the balance between those things. And that's why I think like onboarding is almost like the word onboarding in my mind is also
it art or science?
Like it's the idea that something happens, a bunch of stuff happens, and then it's in production and it's done. And that creates two problems. One problem is it creates perfection on the front end where customers are like, it's been 3 months, nothing's happened, or you're waiting for somebody or something like that. The single best MSSP that I think did this, and this is the previous MSSP I was at, was called Adlumin. It's now part of Enable. And we had what we called sensible defaults, where we had we called it 90-minute onboarding, because the fact is we could set sensible defaults to get things started. And then we knew that this was a constant partnership. And so whether it's our data science models or other things, we were constantly tuning and tweaking. And I think like onboarding is almost an anti-pattern where you're like, all right, I gotta go this. I get through my checklist. Everything's perfectly fine. Got it done. SOC, go respond to some alerts. And I think figuring something out differently like that can be really helpful and helps you avoid also churn.
But in the interval between when you start onboarding when you finish onboarding, say 3 weeks later, things have already changed.
Right.
I wonder, are too many companies taking on MSSPs as partners instead of running their own security? Like, is MSSP being overdrawn? Like for a company like mine, like I'm actually too small for even an MSSP. We're like 3 people plus contract. But suppose I'm a 30-person company and maybe I got like 1 IT person, right? I really don't want to be aware on a day-to-day basis as to what the SOC is doing. I just want some assurance that if my preventive controls don't work, I come from security, I'm ex-security, but I know what that means. I know that the job of an MDR shop is to be the last line of defense, contrary to what it's not the first, it's the last. I want that so that it's less likely I will have to hit my cyber insurance. Or better yet, I want my MSSP to be effectively the same thing as my cyber insurance and give me guarantees. But I also expect there are things I have to do. For example, I have an accountant. She gives me tax advice. If I don't take that tax advice, I'm getting audited. She's not. She just charges me more for the audit. And I wonder if there is this tendency to push up market and for MSSPs to take on customers that really should just be doing their own stuff. And then companies that are too small to have the staff necessary to have the awareness and the interactions and like is the MSSP market chasing the wrong kinds of customers?
It's a long conversation.
I remember a time when like if you had a SOC, if there was a SOC, it was yours. And there were companies like, Counterpane and Red Siren, like, historically, who were sort of trying to figure out just doing managed security monitoring, flipping alerts over the wall to somebody. And the service was pretty bad, but that's how it worked. And small companies just had this sort of like deal. Threats have gotten bad enough, common enough, serious enough. Even small companies are basically IT companies. Like we're very heavily IT leveraged, very heavily AI leveraged, and cyber attacks could kill us. But I, as a very small business, self-funded startup, I don't have enough to be latched onto by a managed service provider. And I wonder if that's true of a lot of companies.
Well, every organization needs to define who their audience is, who their top prospects should be and shouldn't be wasting their time with organizations that they can't serve. We're here to, as a partnership to be able to serve people well. And of course, profitability on both sides matter. And knowing what that profile is critical. And you only can define that once you understand what clients you're serving and what it is that you can do well.
Yeah, there've been hints in this conversation about different kinds of MSSPs. Evgeniy, you were talking about managed firewall. Jessvin, you mentioned basically like security monitoring in the kind of classic MDR sense. There is also, I don't know, identity management as a service. There is I can see the signs of like this oncoming managed security for AI applications, like all this stuff like what we vibe code. Some people are starting to sell that stuff, and security will have to be handled for companies that have one application that they built over, their summer vacation, and they don't even know how it works exactly. So do we need to segment the term MSSP?
I think we need to define, in my mind, MSSP is someone that has 24/7. This is how at least I look on this. That I'm watching you 24/7. Now, for a company to build their own SOC, we're talking for quite a lot of people. So even if it's one person in the SOC and a manager, at least 5, 6 people, at least, to rotate them, different shifts, going on vacation. So how big you need to be to have a SOC to have 5 people? And this is beside engineering and operation people. So I think we are talking to people that are going a bit bigger to have a full-blown MSSP. We can claim that we're doing 9 to 5 and have some automation after that, or I'm doing 9 to 5 and then I flip it back to MSSP. I always view, and maybe I'm skewed because I worked for a long time for MSSP, that I want to be focusing on the stuff I'm doing as a company. So if I have a shawarma truck, I want to make shawarma. I don't want to deal with cybersecurity. If I'm a restaurant, if I'm an insurance company, I want to be doing that. This is what I'm doing. Same, honestly, as me. I'm not a mechanic. I tried. I suck. Okay. I don't want to fix my car. I would prefer that my company will do me a managed services every time something happens with my car, which is going to be automatically fixed, and I don't need to deal with it.
I think that's a great analogy because I also like car analogies. But, one of the things I think what makes managed security services so hard, related to related to what Evgeniy was just saying, is that the market really wants it and the market really needs it. But it's a really hard thing to do. There is no such thing as managed car services. You either have a car that you bought and that you get a different car, or you have a mechanic that looks at a project by project basis. There's nobody that's like, oh, you know what? You'll pay me for, whenever anything goes wrong. Because then you get into the point of, well, the car's rattling a little bit. I got a funny noise. Can you go fix it? I'm not really happy with you. It's actually like, again, it just goes back to scope. I don't know why, but it popped into my mind. This random thought popped in my mind. It was like, and maybe it was, I saw the movie. I had my kids watch the movie Moneyball recently. If you know that movie about statistics in sports and how it's done differently and all those kinds of things. And one of the things the character says is, when you're like, people in baseball think about buying players. And he goes, you shouldn't be thinking about buying players. You should be thinking about buying wins. And in a similar way, like the challenge of MSSP is like people want to have them protect their enterprise. But actually, that's not what MSSP is, or any security is really capable of. It's protecting particular assets. And so when there's a difference between these two things, it gets really, really, really challenging. Like if you want me to protect a particular server, and then I know what that server does and all of those things, it's great. If you tell me protect your company, well, there's so many pieces to it. It's like really hard to do. And so I think in general, the proposition of MSSP is really hard, which is why you try to define scope, which is why you try to do things, which is what leads to, I definitely think there's lots of different services out there, like you said, Peter, that people want to simplify it though. But it's like, you've got co-managed SIM, you've got MDR. I mean, MDR for a long time is just, why did MDR get so successful? Like, why are MDR companies very profitable? Like the most profitable ones I've seen are in MDR. Or even if you look at somebody like Arctic Wolf, why? They actually de-scoped significantly. Like everybody will complain that Arctic Wolf is a black box. And again, there's no, I haven't worked for them or anything like that. But I hear that from customers as a black box. But on the flip side, it's a black box. That's what makes their service work. They don't allow you to search logs. They don't allow you to do this. And MDRs basically scoped things down to the endpoint. They're like, this is what we do. We protect this endpoint. That's it. And they did it really, really well. Right. And that scope allows you to build things more like software. I don't want anybody to lose hope on the MSSP business. Like I said, that's why my friend goes, hey, swim back to Alcatraz. I think it is a critical capability, and it is like something the market wants and needs, but it is like a constantly evolving space. We haven't found, like, it's very rare to find the point. I mean, think of like even like historically, like, you just mentioned Counterpane, right? Like a perfect example. Like, I don't know, 15 years ago, none of those companies are around. Maybe SecureWorks, but it's nothing like the SecureWorks before, right? None of those companies are around. And so it's been this constant evolution of the space, that's there. And now we've got the MDRs, and now CrowdStrike and SentinelOne and all of those things are, starting to get in there and expand their services. So I do think like there are lots of different services. I don't think anybody's going to get into, they're still going to want the simple word and they're going to call it MSSP. But I think for every company themselves, it goes back to what was said before, which is like, got to know who you are, what you're focused on. Make sure you can do that really well, and make sure there's enough growth in that business, to get profitable. So I know I jumped around a lot of topics, but a bunch of things you guys said to me, like, just triggered some various thoughts in my mind.
When you look at the website of an MSSP and you go to like the customers we serve or the industries, I really want one to say shawarma truck. Right? I mean, location type of business, like my deepest experience in MSSPs, like running, the first time I ran MDR, P&L, was a company that served alternative investments and hedge funds, private equity, not venture capital because they were too volatile. And then for the PEs, we would pick up portcos. The portcos were harder. The portcos had more variation. The portcos were more difficult to make a profit with. Whereas when we stuck to our lane, we could have stability and predictability. We knew how to talk to those people. We knew that, for example, they hated being referred to as professional services. I mean, sorry, no, financial services. We're not financial services. We're investors. Like, okay, fine. We found out that they care more about user experience, particularly the hedge funds. Like that was paramount. Latency, performance, uptime on the desktop, like that was everything. And if you impacted that, you were not serving them well. Shawarma probably has its own challenges, especially in the trucks. Lots of wireless, I guess. And it seems silly, but any industry will have a certain something. And a lot of time it's location. It's, can I drive to see you? Can we have lunch together? I see this in recruiting all the time. People are like, I can't get a job. I'm like, why does it say United States on your CV? Where are you? Who have you had coffee with lately? Oh, I want to be remote. I'm like, I don't care. You're going to go see people. The irony being that Jessvin, I know you're in Denver. Evgeniy, I think you're in Canada somewhere. Sandhya, you're just cosmic. You're everywhere.
Wait, I have a question. So,
yeah.
Evgeniy, do you actually have any shawarma trucks? Just as
it's a good question.
Sandhya said that she's got a yoga business on the side.
I don't know. I think this is something that I like shawarma a lot, okay? As somebody that spent time in Israel, and there's amazing shawarma across the world, not just, of course, in Israel. Like Lebanon is amazing shawarma. And I don't know. I don't think there's shawarma trucks. Maybe it's like something I'm open when I'm done with cyber.
Well, you're in Canada. There aren't a lot of trucks. You go inside for your shawarma.
We have food trucks. Yeah, we have food trucks in Toronto.
So hang on. Who's the coffee shop owner?
I am. That's why I asked. So like, you know what gives me hope about the profitability of MSSP, by the way, is it could be a lot worse. Is the unprofitability of the coffee business, especially if you're doing the small local business shop like I am. So it's like, it's all relative in that sense. I'm like, this is a great problem to have from a profitability and growth standpoint.
Well, at a certain level, every business is the same, but especially if you have recurring revenue. I mean, what one of the things that influenced me a lot lately was Alex Hormozi's stuff about running gyms. And you have recurring revenue. You have the customers that make you more money because they never call you. And then eventually they just block their credit card, and now you got to acquire more customers. But, you have your recurring coffee customers and your recurring shawarma customers and so on. And at a certain level, it's all about discipline, about having confidence in your own service. It's about having a good business. I mean, I think that one of the reasons that MSSPs tend to struggle financially is most of them are just not good. And most businesses are not good, which is why there's opportunity to pick up customers from companies that have churn because they're just not good. Now, if your company is also not good, then it just goes on from there. And eventually they land on a company like ReliaQuest, Arctic Wolf, the good ones, maybe.
Customer, when they got born in one MSSP, it's become even harder to convince them to move. But you know what? It's okay. Should we move to the second one? When they're not happy with the second one, how will they trust? What does the MSSP need to do that somebody will believe to move third time, fourth time? It is hard, especially when there's a lot of them that are trying to capture and pretend they're doing everything. In the end of the day, they're getting to the A team to present to you, and the moment you're over the fence, you get the C or the D team working with you. Probably different episode, but that's a good talk about it.
Well, it's interesting, Peter, you mentioned like ReliaQuest and things like that, which reminds me of another, when we think about profitability too, going back to it's not linear, my belief is that there's also, if you look at MSSPs at different points in their growth curve, is where they have different levels of impact. So, or they're impacted by profitability. So I actually think there's a valley of death period. And the valley of death is somewhere between probably 10 million to 20, 30 million, something like that, probably 50 million even. Like, so I know that's a broad base. But what I've seen is, and it's a lot like Gartner hype curve. It's like everything's awesome, then it's not, then hopefully you level out. But what I think happens is, going back to like, because MSSP isn't exactly software and isn't exactly professional services, but can kind of look like that. And you also don't know what good is. It's hard to tell later. Early on the life cycle of MSSP, nobody sends out and like, I'm going to build a crappy business, right? They build a pretty good business, and it's good for 5, 10, 20 customers, some number of customers. And somewhere along the way, in a way you don't realize, so you're like, great, it's good. Somewhere you don't realize, like, the business goes bad. And the business goes bad not because you've changed, right? But the fundamental growth of your business, technology's changed, adversaries changed, and customer base has changed. All those three have changed. You've stayed the same, and so those things are dragging down on you. So even if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, all those three outside things are acting on you, and they're sort of bringing you downwards. And that's what I call like the valley of death. Like, a lot of times it happens to people when, let's say they're running 8, 10 people-ish, on SOC 24/7. So like at that point, they're like, oh, they've been able to keep up with it with a certain amount of customers. They're running night times and weekends, one person per shift, no shift leader, but on the weekdays, there's like 3 or 4 people, and all sort of works out, right? And then at some point, those other things change. Either the adversary moves too fast, technology changes, or the customer base has gotten too big, and none of that's working anymore. And then there are very, very few people that have this combined skill set of business, technology, operations, and customer services to survive through that curve and figure out what to do. And that's what has, I think, led to ReliaQuest and others, which is like they had to go through that valley to get there. But there's a lot of MSSPs in that valley. And that's what I think we hear a lot about. Like, there's a lot of small ones doing really well. There's a few big ones that have made it. And there's a lot right there in the middle. Customers turning between all of that.
I want to challenge something you said. And I think it's taken as an article of faith. And I've said it before I asked that. Who knows the Anna Karenina principle here? We all read Guns, Germs, and Steel in the airport, right? Anna Karenina principle says what? Every happy family is happy in the same way. Every unhappy family is unhappy in a different way. Is it that we don't know what good looks like? Or we are concentrating all the many, 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 many ways, constantly dynamic, constantly changing ways that something can be bad? I mean, I know when I buy a service, I know if it's good or not, because I don't have problems. I get the result I need most of the time within boundaries, right? And if it's security, I don't get hacked. Are we afraid to like put a stake in the ground? I mean, the insurance company knows what to do. Marsh has their list of 12 things. I've heard that there are like 5 things without which no one will underwrite your insurance. They know. They have the stats. Can the MSSP world do the same thing and say, I mean, CrowdStrike had this. If you have our stuff in protect mode, we'll pay $1 million if you get popped. And I think they only paid once. I think. If you're in CrowdStrike and I'm wrong, you tell me and I will correct. But like, do we really not know what good looks like?
Well, I think it's like, it's not that we don't know what good looks like until bad has happened. So that's what I mean by like, if you don't get an alert or you don't get something or you're onboarded or whatever it is, it's hard to tell that you got good. Like you won't know until something has happened. And then you're like, oh, that device wasn't logging. I mean, I see that all the time. Like some event happened. How come you guys didn't catch it? Well, you guys didn't send me the logs in the first place. So is that good or bad that we didn't tell you, you didn't send it? Which one is it? And that's why scope impacts it a little bit. Why I think people like CrowdStrike will do well is because, okay, their scope is on the device. And they set that scope specifically, by the way. Like in order to get paid out those things, you have to be on the latest version or maybe one version before. You have to have certain settings on. You have to do this, this, and this. And because it's software, it's very fixed. It's black and white. You either have that thing on or you don't have that thing on. And that's where I think like it's a little bit of a struggle with MSSP. It's like, how do you know that you've done these things to be, successful, that we can protect your organization or whatever it is. And you just won't know until something bad happens, which is why I think like one of the things that I don't think is taken off as well as I thought it would is really just continuous pen testing being delivered by MSSPs themselves. Because to your point of like, I actually think churn impacts is more like if you almost think of like, it's not a sales cost, but if you somehow thought of continuous pen testing almost as not a loss, but like I don't know, build it into your margin or something. It's like churn protection. Then you'd be getting closer to we know what good is and we don't know what good is. But I think it's hard to measure that otherwise.
You can also add breach attack simulation, continuous threat exposure. There's many services that are similar to what you're saying. But Peter, towards your question about what's good, I think good, it's a moving dot, moving scale, because something changed in the environment. We're learning from our mistakes. Before Log4j, we were thinking good is one. Log4j happened. Now we learned that we actually was not doing some things that we were supposed to be doing. The next problem happened. Like, okay, now we more adapted with a issue because we already understand this part. But then in 6 months, we're gonna have completely new problem. We didn't know we need to have XYZ. AI, without going too deep to AI, right now something gonna happen. We'll need to have an asset management or LLMs, for example. Maybe managed services on how we protect. So the good is changing. I spent 5 years in the Navy, and there is not a job, but every rule in the Navy or in the Army was written because something happened. Okay, this is a bad idea to point weapon to someone. Doesn't matter if it's loaded, not loaded. Let's write a rule. Okay, somebody got shot. Okay, we need to make sure everybody unloads their weapon and check there is nothing in the weapon before they get into the base. And there's like hundreds of different tools like that.
Because somebody got shot.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So let's close with one question. With a constraint. What's your big bold prediction for the next 18 months? Can't say AI. What's going to happen with MSSP?
Okay.
No AI.
No AI.
What's coming?
So in my mind, we're going to see more vendors providing managed services or some kind of services. And I think the smart MSSPs will turn more to aggregation of vendors with services versus doing the work by themselves for everything. We still need the MSSPs, don't get me wrong. We still need to take all this Lego and 3D puzzle and put it together. And someone need to talk to the customer, but we already see these notions. You mentioned CrowdStrike, with their Complete, and SentinelOne with Vigilant, and others as well, to combining all the services to provide the customer the face of the complete services, the ticketing system.
That sounds cool. Sandhya, what do you think?
That's a good question, actually. I think the market will grow tremendously. I think with the understanding that the MSSPs can really provide value, I think that the MSSP space will blow up. There's a lot of organizations that are still trying to create their own SOCs, and they're finding that to be more challenging. I think that's the growth there. I think the cloud adoption is constantly increasing. Regulatory pressures, I think, will increase. And of course, you mentioned, don't mention AI, but I'm going to mention AI. I think that we'll be able to better manipulate AI because right now we think that everything can and should be automated, whereas we're seeing that that's not fully working. So hopefully we will be able to leverage AI in such a way that the automation will be more effective. and breach indemnity policies. I think that will be on the rise as well.
I think taking AI is a hard thing. So I won't bring it in yet. And I don't know I think in the most immediate term, and even what I'm seeing right now with people I talk with is like, I think while the market overall is going to grow, I think you're going to continue to see price pressure. I think you're going to see price points come down because there are more entrants in the space. And it comes back to your paradox, right? Which is there's more entrants in the space that while it's growing, the number of entrants and the number of commoditization factors brings profitability down. So I think there's more people that are competing. There are more every day. Everybody remember like MSSP 500 or something like that? There's like 5 million on there. MSSP Alert has like a MSSP 500 list. And there's like thousands, but there was a day in time when there was 500, but I think the number of companies is still growing. And like I said, it could just be you have 5 to 10 customers. Doesn't mean you're at scale. It means there's just different companies doing it. So I think that's one thing is that's going to continue to do it, but price is going to be pressured because I don't think the price can keep holding the way it is. I think the cost of data is coming down. I do think that like more and more people are building these things towards software. And that's really what people want. People want software. People want the easy button software. And whether it's like Guards or Coro or any of those guys, they're driving more towards software. So I kind of see that happening. And then I think platformization has an impact as well. I think that like a co-managed SIM continues to be a hard challenge because at some point you were very opinionated about how you wanted that to deliver. And we've seen that in the last year in the market, the entire SIM market get totally disrupted, right? So Splunk went to Cisco, Logarithm's part of Exabeam, QRadar went to Palo Alto, or at least the cloud version of it. And you're seeing new entrants in the space. Vega just launched, Panther's around, so like I think there's a lot of shift happening in sort of data management and SOC. I don't think that's going to create a tsunami where everything changes overnight over the next 5 years, but I do think all that noise is going to drive growth, but price pressure. And that's why I think I'm going to have to bring in the AI because I do think that like, as long as other people are using it and as long as people can't tell the difference between exactly this or that, it is the only way to drive growth at sustainable margin. And so I do believe I'm one of those people that do believe we are going to see humanless SOC. Like to me, that is an absolute outcome. That doesn't mean there's going to be no humans in cybersecurity. They're going to be more like data scientists. We're going to be constantly running models and finding out if these models are working or not, right? Like remember back in the day, we used to do DAT files. Nobody's looking at DAT files anymore. They're just uploading and running it, right? And yeah, CrowdStrike happened, but nobody's going, oh, what CrowdStrike happened? I'm not going to do upgrades. So in a similar way, I think the speed is so fast that we're going to see that technology. But I don't think that's going to Sandhya's point, it's not going to happen overnight. We're going to see a lot more things break and a lot more hype than full solution. But I do think that's the direction. But in between, I think it's going to drive price pressure. And then on top of that, you have macroeconomics. And so I think like knowing your customer, being efficient, monitoring your margin, watching out for your churn is going to be more important now than ever.
Awesome. My opinion, a lot more zombie MSPs, a lot of companies selling it, not delivering it. And then a smaller and smaller, but set of larger shops like the Arctic Wolves, the ReliaQuest, I don't know. We'll see about Deepwatch. They're sort of, yeah, or the Expels. Yeah, like high quality is going to attract quality customers, but there will be a lot of companies that are sliding out of existence because we're heading into an economic depression. We were recording this on the 19th of September, 2025, and the world's a pretty crazy place right now. And as somebody who has international exposure and looks a lot of currencies, things are about to get weird. And so the overall disruption, the macroeconomic disruption is going to cause problems for anybody who's got people in, say, Romania plus Bengaluru, right? Things are about to get strange. I didn't say anything about AI. How do people get a hold of y'all?
I have a very weird name, Evgeniy Kharam, Evgeniy, last name Kharam, LinkedIn, Google. Thanks God there's not too many Evgeny. So if you put it in Google, you're going to find me, my book, my podcast, my work. So should be easy.
LinkedIn's probably the best way. It's linked/in/Jessvin, Jessvin, or Jessvin at blueshiftadvisory.com.
And Sandhya.
LinkedIn is definitely an easy way to reach me. You can type in G-O, the number 4, and my first name, Sandhya, Sandhya. Go for Sandhya. Of course, if you want to reach me by email, you can try AAVICOACH, avicoach @gmail.com. Google Sandhya Pallana. It'll show up.
Thanks so much for being here today. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.